In this quick start tutorial, we're going to be learning how to create and set up a MIDI track for recording. First of all, make sure your MIDI interface and your MIDI controller, like your keyboard, are installed, connected, and on, and that you've identified your MIDI device to Pro Tools either through the Mac Audio MIDI Setup utility or through the MIDI Studio Setup dialog window on Windows systems. As you can see, my Korg Triton is stored for me and available for recall. Let's begin by inserting a MIDI track, New. The New Tracks dialog window opens. Let's create one track. Let's make it a MIDI track. We select MIDI track from this drop-down menu. We can leave it in ticks for now, and while we're at it, let's also create an auxiliary insert track so that we're able to monitor the MIDI input. Aux input, leave it in ticks as well, and create. Our two new tracks appear in the edit window. Let's begin by appropriately naming the tracks so that we can remember what they are later. You always want to give your tracks meaningful names from the get-go. This will save you a lot of time in the editing process later. Let's call this track Groove. Enter some comments if you like. Click OK when you're finished. And here are our new tracks. Let's rename our aux ins track as well. We're going to call it Groove Monitor. And click OK. Now we need to assign inputs and outputs, and we do this in the Mix window. Select Window, Mix, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Control-. That's Command-, on a Mac. Let's get rid of a few things in the Mix window so that it fits better into this space. In the bottom left corner of the Mix window is the View selector. I can click on this drop-down menu and select which items I'd like to hide. Not all the items are showing here in this display. Okay, now it's a little bit shorter. As you can see, the input path selector reads all. Unless you're recording multiple channels of MIDI data on separate MIDI tracks, you can leave it at this, at all. This means that this track will accept MIDI input from all MIDI channels. Otherwise, choose the name of your MIDI instrument. For my output, I want to select my MIDI instrument. As you can see, the instrument I defined in our previous tutorial now appears here. Now I need to select a channel for the transmission of data. And let's enable the track for recording. Once you've record-enabled the MIDI track, when you test your MIDI controller, you should see some level meter indication here. Press a few notes here to see if you have signal. If you do, you're in good shape, and if not, you do need to check out your connections. You may have noticed that we don't actually hear anything. That's because data is coming through, not audio. We're going to take care of that by setting up our aux ins track. Let's set up the input. We need to have our keyboard connected to an audio input on my audio hardware device for this to work. Select this audio hardware input as the input here. I've got mine plugged into my mono connection, so I'm going to select that. Now when you do a level test, you should be able to get some signal there, and you should be able to hear something. And this concludes our quick start tutorial on creating and setting up a MIDI track.